one of the teams that we will see in the playoffs this year, the Philadelphia 76ers. Their coach has a big mouth, and he was yapping about his sordid past. And that is our lead. If you didn't see this and you missed it, I hope you have some heartburn medicine. Doc Rivers, we learned, the coach in Philadelphia. Doc Rivers was asked about his Philadelphia squad and asked whether it compares to the Celtics, a team that won in 2008, or the Lob City Clippers. And that is when Rivers pulled a fast one. He pulled out the bloody knuckles for the teams he coached in Los Angeles. And Doc Rivers was asked again whether this Sixer team is something that reminds him of the Celtics or a team like the Clippers. And he then took a body blow to the Lob City Clippers. As Warner Wolf would say, let's go to the audio tape.
That's a great question. I would say definitely more leaning towards Boston than the Clippers, and not trying to take anything away from that team. That team was never going to win when you look back at it. We just didn't get along well enough as a group, and you can't win without cooperation. That's the only way you can win, and obviously better play.
That line right there. And this is from the Entertainment and Sports Network. It's a small startup in Bristol, Connecticut. But that is the voice of Doc Rivers on one of their NBA shows. And he said that line, that team was never going to win when you look back at it, is what he said. All right, let's discuss the question here. Give me your school of thought on Doc Rivers' claim the Clippers didn't win. Essentially, he's implied because of chemistry is why the Clippers did not win. So I've got Home Depot, Pyromaniac, and Moscow Mule. And we'll combine these three random things together. We'll lay them out on the table, and it's a free-for-all. It's going to be a dog pile is what it's going to be. Now, first of all, someone needs to call Lost and Found. Contact Lost and Found. Now, why do you need to call Lost and Found? Okay, I'll tell you. Because we have just discovered the village idiot. He's missing. And he's in Philadelphia coaching the basketball team in Philadelphia. Doc Rivers, as my grandfather would say, has a lot of chutzpah. Because you got to be joking. Doc Rivers is trying to use a little bit of revisionist history. And may I recommend that his next job is at Home Depot. Because right now he's deep in the fertilizer area of the garden section at Home Depot. This is an example of Doc Rivers trying to gaslight the NBA fan. Gaslighting, if you're unfamiliar, you should know this by now, but gaslighting is something a lot of Weasley politicians do, where they do something and then claim the opposite happened. And that's Doc Rivers when it comes to the Lob City Clippers. Mr. Smooth Talker. Wasn't my fault. It was the fact the players didn't have a good enough camaraderie. Tell me you're a moron, Doc Rivers, without telling me you're a moron, Doc. Nobody has ever confused Doc Rivers with a great strategical mind when it comes to the NBA. Right? His claim to fame, he's a people person. There's a couple of kinds of coaches. The X and O's coach, and there's the Jimmy and Joe's coach, and he's the Jimmy and Joe's type coach. That's been his reputation throughout his career in the NBA. More of a father figure, a guy that keeps people from fighting with each other, motivating players. I don't believe coaches matter all that much in the NBA, but a bad coach can cause problems and be a thorn in the operation. But if you're motivating players and you're creating an environment, an ecosystem that is conducive to success where those players reach their full ability, and whether it's through inspiration or techniques that you do, and I covered those Lob City Clippers a lot. I was at a lot of those games, and I got there early quite often, and sometimes the Clippers would be practicing. And you know what Doc did most of the time at practice? He let the assistant coaches for the Clippers actually do the practice, and then when it was over, Doc would then give a 5-minute speech to the team. He didn't actually do a lot of the meat and potatoes coaching during practice. He let the assistants do it, and then he would come in and give some rah-rah speech, and then they'd break practice. But you talk about the blame game, right? And so, of course, he's going to blame the players, and the players, the camaraderie is not why they lost. That is a fat lie. And Doc Rivers has so much culpability here. So much culpability. It's insane. Now, secondly, let's address the Komodo dragon in the room. The real reason that the Clippers failed to reach their full ability in the Lob City era, and this is going to blow your mind. Nobody else has this take. All right, nobody else. The Clippers were a flower that bloomed during the regular season, but under adversity, they shriveled up, right? And this was not because they didn't like each other. They didn't hang out together enough. They all took separate cabs or Ubers. We got to update the reference. Chris Paul and Blake Griffin and friends racked up all of these wins, all of these accolades. They're the most exciting team in the NBA in that era. They sold out on the road. Everyone wanted to see the Clippers. Most popular team with the hammer dunks from DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin. Big name players in that era. Success in the regular season. But as always, it came down to a single playoff series or a single playoff game. And that is the maddening part of all this. All that matters is who does better in the moment. And under the immense pressure, those Clippers were not properly potty trained. And they pooped the bed. And Doc Rivers was supposed to be the guy that set the tone. Right? He's supposed to be the fireman. And he's the one that calms down the anxiety. And he puts out the flames. And instead of being the firefighter, what did Doc Rivers do? He was an undercover pyromaniac is what Doc Rivers was. A pyromaniac. He was an arsonist. He burned down Lob City. He burned the whole, you know that famous story of the cow in Chicago and all? Yeah, that's Doc. Doc was the cow. The cow that started the Great Fire. The whole Lob City burned down because of Doc. Helpless, incapable of solving the malfunction. And the gold standard, one of the I'm not going to say the worst sporting event. The worst sporting event I went to ever was Game 7 of the 2017 World Series. The cheating a-holes beating the Dodgers while cheating. But this is in my top 5. Game 6, 2015 Western Conference semifinals. I was there. The arena was called Staples Center, downtown L.A. Clippers had a 13-point lead going to the fourth quarter. 13-point lead. So early in the fourth quarter, I had to leave to get back here to the studio to do the show. On my way out, a lot of the people that I knew who worked in the arena were like, hey, congratulations, your team finally got to the conference finals. By the time I got to my car, 4 blocks away, the Clippers were losing. 4-block walk. By the time I got to my car, they were 12 minutes away from their first trip to the Final Four. Now, I realize since then they've gotten to the Final Four and all that. But all of a sudden, this trap door opened up, and that is the single worst basketball loss I can recall. Houston outscored the Clippers 40-15, that Lob City Clipper team in the fourth quarter. And James Harden, if I remember correctly, did not play a minute. It was Josh Smith and a backup named Corey Brewer who combined for 29 points, outscoring the Clippers by themselves by 14 points. And the Clippers couldn't make a shot. And Doc Rivers, he stood there on the sideline, paralyzed. He was absolutely powerless to do anything. And you're the coach of the team, Doc. And now here we are years later. Well, that team was never going to win anything. My fat ass, maybe if you'd done your job and put the right combination of players on the court, they would have won something. Wasn't that what you were hired to do? But what do I know? I just do the overnight show. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe you were not hired to make the right decisions.
We had a great
moments. Oh, you had a great, right? Shut up with your rhythm.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, screw you. Final thought. Is it true that teams have to love each other to win big in the NBA? This is a misnomer. That is a Moscow mule is what that is. And as far as you have a Moscow mule when you go to Moscow for the Bolshoi Ballet, because that's Bolshoi is what that is. And while I will not disagree that certainly it makes it easier, in my early days covering the NBA, I covered some teams that had Darius Miles and Quentin Richardson, and those guys loved each other. They hung out together all the time. They were besties. You know what else? They sucked on the court, okay? And they loved each other, though. They had great camaraderie. They played video games all the time. They were hanging out. They had a fun time. But here's the truth. The NBA, in the history of the NBA, it's filled with teams that have been at loggerheads with each other, and they still won despite squabbling in the locker room and having personal beefs. And the Clippers' issues off the court did not affect that Lob City team losing. And Doc Rivers is a fool to gaslight everyone and say that. And if you believe that Doc is right, you belong in the principal's office. Now, what's my evidence? Doc himself, this is what I talk about gaslighting. Doc omitted, and my friends in Boston can back me up on this, but the 2008 Celtics had Ray Allen and Rajon Rondo, who were always ready to tussle. Now, things got much worse when Allen skedaddled to go join Miami, but they didn't like each other when they were teammates. They were at disagreement in Boston. They won in 2008. LeBron James in Miami loathed Mario Chalmers with the Heat, but they still won 2 titles working side by side together. The greatest example, Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. They were not besties. They were not. Kobe, I was around those teams too. Kobe felt Shaq was a slug, and he wasn't in shape, and he wasn't committed to winning. And he was upset by that because Kobe always worked hard and Shaq didn't. And we've seen other examples of the San Antonio Spurs. Tony Parker was stooping Brent Barry's wife. He was sleeping with a teammate's wife, and San Antonio won 2 titles in that period with Brent Barry and Tony Parker. Heck, Draymond Green and Kevin Durant loathed each other with Golden State when they played together, and they didn't even hide it from the cameras, and they won. So I'm supposed to believe the Clippers didn't win with Doc Rivers coaching and Lob City because of that? Because they didn't get along with each other? Dum-de-dum-dum-dum! Dum-de-dum-dum-dum! Come on. Cooperation. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It makes me sick. It makes me sick.